Hey guys, Taki here. It's been over a year since the Steam Deck launch, and we've seen all kinds of competitors hit the market to try to grab a piece of the pie, but we've never seen one like this. This is AYANEO's biggest handheld, and the resemblance between it and the deck is so striking that I'm opting to call this the Steam Deck Ultra. In this video, we're going to do a first impressions look at this beast, as well as a direct comparison between it and the Steam Deck. So we're going to kick things off with the unboxing experience, since I have to imagine a lot of the cost of this thing is going to go towards the entire packaging process. Just for the record, this is the AYANEO Kun, which is how the name is pronounced in Chinese. It's also a popular word in Japanese, but I'm just going to call it the big fish, which is what the name means in Chinese, or I'll call it the AYANEO Chan, which is a popular meme name for this device right now. So this is the box that it comes in. This is the most extra packaging that I've ever seen in this market. Here's the inner tackle box in all its glory. We're going to slide off this sleeve, and then we can slide off the clear top. Under that, we have a picture of a mountain, and then we have these two sections. I didn't look at this one yet, but in my mind, this is based on an old style of Chinese books. I've only ever seen these in museums. Under that, we have a few other goodies. Inside this square box, we have a charger. Turns out this thing is a 100-watt GAN charger. Oh, wow. Usually I don't use their chargers, but this one actually looks pretty nice. We have two USB Type-A ports and two USB Type-C ports. The last two boxes hold adapters for this charger and a USB cable. That just leaves us with this last flap, which has the device itself. Before we go any further into this video, let's talk about the specs and the pricing of this guy. This device is powered by the same 7840U that is making the rounds all over the place right now. The big takeaway this time around is that this device has a max TDP of 54 watts. We still have the same Radeon 780M, and we should be able to max it out with a small overclock at 54 watt TDP. The review unit that I have came with 32 gigabytes of LPDDR5X RAM running at 6400, but I've already changed it to 7500 in the BIOS. It also came with a 2 terabyte SSD, but I've swapped that out for a 1 terabyte drive from my AYANEO 2S. The screen in the Big Fish is huge. It's an 8.4-inch 1600p display with a max brightness of 700 nits and refresh rate support for 35 to 60 Hz. The last big thing that we have here is a massive 75 watt-hour battery that easily takes the cake over every other handheld that's on the market right now. But now it's time to come back to earth to talk about the price. How much will it cost to hook the Big Fish? I don't have an answer for that because they haven't told me, but Aya did say that this will be the most expensive device that they've ever sold. I read a comment from someone that said it would be a miracle if this device sells for $900, but I think it would be a miracle if you divide the retail price by 2 and end up with a 3-digit number. There's no way this beast is going to be cheap, so it's just a question of how many Steam Decks it will cost to get one. My guess is 3 to 4 512 gigabyte Steam Decks. This thing has a ton of controls going on, so we're going to go over all of them because they're not all intuitive just from looking at this. We are going to start on the left side. Our top button is an Xbox guide button. Under that, we have a camera for Windows Hello. Honestly, I would just put tape over this, or I would just disconnect this internally because this is not something that I need. Then we have a joystick with L3 functionality, and underneath that, we have a circle D-pad, and we'll talk more about that in just a bit. Under that, we have our left trackpad. By default, this thing operates as a scroll wheel on a mouse. So if I open up this menu, you can see that it acts just as a mouse would. On the very bottom, we have start and select. On the other side at the top, we have a T button. This doesn't do anything right now, but in the future, this will change the options for the trackpad. I'm assuming that it will switch between mouse mode or using these as analog stick replacements like they are on the deck. To the side, we have a big set of ABXY buttons, and these feel almost identical to the buttons on the Steam Deck. I'm actually a big fan of that. Under that, we have another analog stick, and I didn't mention it, but obviously we have RGB ring lights around these, like they have on all of their recent products. And then underneath that, we have another trackpad. This one will operate as a mouse by default, but they do have plans for a lot of other options to customize it further. If you click over on the side, the trackpad will vibrate a bit, and the same thing happens with the trackpad on the left. But if you press on this side, it will do a left click, and if you do it on the other side, it will do a right click. When it comes to using this as a mouse, I think it's way better than using the analog sticks. That leaves us with the Aya button that opens up their software, and a second button that functions as Show Desktop in this current software. Now we're on to the top, and we have a couple of things here that are worth talking about. First, we have a good set of R1 and L1 buttons. These feel like a decent upgrade over the ones that are in the deck, but R2 and L2 feel almost identical to the deck. Near this, we have our macro buttons that can be customized inside the AYASpace software, and we have a fingerprint combo power button. To the side of that, we have a volume button, a microphone, an activity light, a Type-C port, a full-size Type-A port, and a big exhaust for the fan. On the bottom, we have a set of stereo speakers, another USB Type-C port for charging and data transfer, and we have a headphone jack. There appears to be a microphone right here, so this would mean that we have dual mics, which I'm assuming is for noise cancellation, just like on the deck. We don't have a whole lot of stuff going on when it comes to the back. We have a set of back buttons. These are smaller than they are on the deck, and it is noticeable. They are raised just a bit over the shell, and they're mapped to the face buttons by default. You can't customize them with the current software, but they do have plans to do that in the future. On the sides, you'll see that we have this kind of piece that can come off here on the grip. Aya hates visible screws on their devices, but they don't bother me, and I don't know how many of you guys worry about this stuff. These hide some of the screws that keep this back shell in place, but I would be kind of worried if the clips that hold these in place ever get damaged from a fall or something like that. I've already taken this apart to swap out the drive that was in here with the one that was in my AYANEO 2S. Unfortunately, I'm not able to film the inside of this unit for this video. I probably should include an extra set of these inside the box, or an extra 2, because this is where you will see the most damage from this lying down on a surface, which is not uncommon for other devices that have a smooth surface finish like this. It can happen on all of those devices. This smooth surface does show fingerprints a lot easier than on something like the Steam Deck. I hope these guys branch out to use some other surface types on future devices, especially if they want to use something that is this dark. You've probably already noticed it, but we have a huge area on the back for air intake. They say that this thing can support 54 watt TDP, but I haven't had a chance to test that out yet. The entire other half of this back is just for that 75 watt hour battery, and the device does feel close to being balanced right in the center. That leaves us with the kickstand. It's kind of thin. It can hold the device up. I don't know if I would want to play the device with the stand because it's not that rigid or strong enough to do that, but it is a good option to set this down on a table if you wanted to use an external controller, since this screen is so big. There's an SD card slot right under the stand that you can also use to expand your storage. There is one thing about this device that I've been told not to film because it's secret at this point. When it's disclosed in the future, you'll be able to rewatch this section and realize what it was that I wasn't able to film by checking what I didn't film too closely. In this section, I just want to do a head-to-head comparison between the deck and AYANEO. I think one of the first things that's probably screaming out to you if you are a deck owner are the trackpads. If you've used a deck for a long time, then you'll probably say that this new layout for the trackpads won't work well. You can kind of simulate this for yourself if you pretend like the trackpads on the deck were pushed down to where the two bottom buttons are. We'll come back to this. There are a few other important differences between these devices. Obviously, we have a much bigger screen, but we also have a much brighter screen. I tried to roughly match these side by side. The Steam Deck is at 100%, and this is at 70% on Aya. When both are at 100%, the improvement is striking, especially since this is the brightest PC handheld that I've ever seen. I did mention that the ABXY buttons felt identical to the ones on the Steam Deck, and I kind of want to see if they match up to the same size. The deck comes in at 8.5 millimeters, and Aya is just a bit bigger at 9 millimeters, so it's not an exact clone. That being said, it is kind of crazy how similar these guys feel. The joysticks are largely the same between both of these. These use Hall sticks, but you can get Hall upgrades for the deck made by the same company, so that's not a big difference. I do want to say one thing about using these circle trackpads. Like, even if they were in the quote-unquote right position, they don't really feel the same as the ones on the deck. They are sunken into the shell a bit, and the surface is smooth. I like the texture of the trackpads on the Steam Deck more. Now, we definitely need to talk about the differences between the D-pads because you're probably wondering about that yourself. The Steam Deck has a normal D-pad. It's not the best, it's serviceable, and certainly not the worst. Big Fish uses an 8-way circle D-pad. If I pull off the top, you can kind of see how this works. So this thing rotates around here, and it presses down on what feels like conductive rubber in every position. Circle D-pads get a ton of hate in this market, which kind of makes it strange that companies would even try to use this. I personally think the amount of people that are out there that want something like this pales in comparison to the amount of people that want a normal one. I'm not ready to pass full judgment in this video, but I have tested this a bit in some fighting games, and I can kind of see where they were coming from. I still think a normal one is a safer bet when you're going to build a handheld like this. When devices are as expensive as this will probably be, I feel like people are looking for reasons not to buy something more than they're looking for ones that would make them buy it. But it probably comes down to the systems that you grew up playing. I grew up with mostly Nintendo consoles except for a Saturn, but even Sega went to a normal D-pad for their final console. Now I want to briefly talk about the shoulder buttons. I already mentioned that L1 and R1 are pretty good on this. Those are really the only buttons that I don't like on the deck, and this style seems like conductive rubber ones would have been a much better option for the deck. When it comes to R2 and L2, both devices feel so similar, even though the triggers are bigger on AYA. So in this respect, this does feel like an upgrade over the buttons that are on the deck. When it comes to thickness, we're around 22.5 millimeters on the fish, and we're around 20 millimeters on the deck. This one is thicker, but they did try to do some design work here to make it not that apparent. The next thing that I want to talk about is the grip. The Steam Deck is known for having a good grip, and I would go on to say that the ergonomics of the Steam Deck are pretty awesome. This one has a smaller grip, and I assume that was done because they wanted to keep the total thickness down. Because of that, the grip ergonomics aren't as good as the deck, but I think it could have been a solid match if they would have exaggerated the size of the grip a bit more. Maybe that just means we'll need a grip attachment. And I do want to point out that I personally find the back buttons on the Steam Deck to be a lot easier to press, largely due to how big they are. If you see the difference between the buttons, these ones come in much smaller and it is noticeable. And I also find that they're a bit lower than they are on the deck. If we measure from the top of both devices to the top of the first button, that's 45 millimeters on the deck and 66 millimeters on AYA. You can kind of get an idea of how this would be if you imagine that your first button on the Steam Deck was pushed down to where the second one currently is. This all goes hand in hand with overall ergonomics. I think this layout doesn't appear like it would be that good, but it actually works out really well, and everything that you want to use is within reach pretty easily. Chan uses a bigger screen, so those kinds of ergonomics aren't as easy to implement unless you wanted to make this device really big. I'd say this hand transition right here is pretty standard, and it isn't anything to worry about from a comfort standpoint. But using those trackpads I think would be difficult. I could see myself using them to do some aiming in FPS games, but that means that I would also need to be ready to use R2 to shoot, or maybe R1 depending on the game. That extension of the hand is doable, but it's a little extreme. If you have bigger hands, this might not be a big issue, but this is a bigger total gap than it is on the deck by a lot. This feels like a more comfortable extension of your fingers. The last thing that I want to talk about in this video is the screen. It's one of the most striking differences between these two devices. This screen is awesome, and it's awesome for a variety of reasons, not least of which is the fact that the screen is super bright. We're going to look at some measurements in just a moment, but I do want to go over the options that we have here. If we go into the display settings, you'll see that we have a pretty high screen resolution. I have this set to 125%, but we can put it at 150% to make it a bit easier to film. One of the great things about this panel is the fact that it supports a much lower refresh rate than we normally see on these handhelds. So if we look at this right here, you'll see that we just have 60 Hz as an option. After I found this, what I did is I loaded up CRU, and I started by adding a 50 Hz refresh rate option to see if it would work. I refreshed the screen and found that that mode worked. So I was like, okay, 50 Hz works, but it's even more rare for 40 Hz to work. So I tried 40, and 40 Hz also worked. Once I found out that 40 Hz worked, I added 40 Hz as a refresh rate for all of the resolutions that I would need. I then made sure that they worked in some games. I found out that the lowest refresh rate that this thing supports is 33 to 35 Hz. You don't really need to go that low, but going down to 40 Hz is big because that means that you can use this with SteamOS and you can get like a one-to-one clone of the deck, which is nuts. We've never seen that yet because this is the first device with a full complement of buttons to match what the Steam Deck offers. Unfortunately, I did find one strange bug while I was working on this comparison video. As I said, I added 40Hz options to this device already, and I confirmed that they worked, but I'm not able to select them at this point. This is just kind of a hunch, but the only thing that I changed between doing that last time and this time is the Adrenaline version that I have. Problem seems to be that this is not compatible with the OEM pre-release driver. There's a newer driver from AMD, but it's crap. Like, it cuts the performance in half, so I don't want to use it. This is an older driver and it doesn't have those issues, so we won't be able to showcase the 40Hz mode working in this video, but it does work. I hope that we'll see a retail driver update soon that doesn't suck, so I can show it off and demonstrate the benefits of using it with this device. Before we look at the graphs, I will say when both devices are near each other, the gap in screen quality is very obvious. It's even more obvious when you're playing games that have a big dynamic range. Colors pop more, the contrast ratio is a bit higher, and things generally look a lot better than they do on the deck. So if you found the image quality on the deck to not be up to scratch, even when you use things like Vibrant Deck, this is going to be a huge upgrade across the board. But enough talk, let's look at the data. Starting out with the deck, we can see that we score 71.9% of the sRGB color space. Ideally, you'd want this to be as close to 100% as possible. Lower values mean a lack of saturation and color accuracy. We do have a pretty decent max brightness of 537 nits. When it comes to Big Fish, we max out the sRGB gamut, and all of our colors are more accurate than they are on the deck, as represented by the bar chart on the left. We also have a max brightness of 683 nits. Since we max out the sRGB scale, we need to go up to the next color space, which is the P3 color space. Using that, we hit 93.5%, which is extremely high for a gaming device, but especially one that isn't using an OLED or an AMOLED panel. The color temperature is pretty close between both devices, with whites appearing to be a bit more blue than they do on this new AYA device. Lower values here mean a warmer display, and 6600 Kelvin is right near an industry standard of D65. Finally, we have the contrast ratio. On the deck, we hit 1058:1. Higher values here mean deeper and darker blacks in games that you're playing. On the new AYA device, we are at 1373:1. Even though these values are close together, this is a sizable improvement over the deck that you can see, especially if you're playing darker games. But that's about all I want to focus on this first video. I've got another video planned where we'll delve into performance, battery life, and thermals, as well as anything else people are interested in seeing. This is an interesting handheld, and we've only scratched the surface in this one. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see another, take a look at a video that I did on the RGB 10 Max 3 Pro. That handheld should be orders of magnitude cheaper than this one. Happy gaming, everyone. Taki out.